Good evening. My name is Lindsay Sutherland Boal, and I'm the founder of She Walks Canada, a movement to engage and empower sober and sober-curious women globally, changing their relationship with alcohol. And we do that in two ways. We walk the walk and talk the talk. You can find more information at shewalkscanada.com. And tonight is a very special evening here at She Walks. It is the second installment of the 2023 She Walks Canada Authors Series, where tonight we are joined by Lisa Smith, author of the chilling memoir, Girl Walks Out of a Bar. Lisa, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored and I'm thrilled.
Beautiful. In addition to being the author of Girl Walks Out of a Bar, Lisa is a speaker, recovery coach, producer, and co-host of the award-winning recovery podcast, Recovery Rocks. She was also named one of the New York Law Journal's 2020 Trailblazers for the story that is in Girl Walks Out of a Bar, and is an advocate for leading well-being in the legal profession. Lisa has been heard on Today, BBC World News, and Fox News discussing substance use disorders, and her writing has been published in the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, and Refinery 29, among many, many others. And we're very honored to have you with us, Lisa. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So there's 5 areas that I would like to center our discussion around tonight. And the first one is 19 years into your recovery journey. What are your thoughts around what were contributing factors to your substance use disorder? That's number 1. Number 2 is your progression and negotiation and denial, as we were just talking about, over time. Number 3, hiding the severity of your addiction from those who love you and know you. And 4, that moment that you refer to as something that will forever be unknown to you, that aha moment, and then leading into Gracie Square, the Asian floor, and Dr. Landry. and then finally, your association with the word normal pops up several times in the book, and it makes a beautiful full circle as you get into full-time recovery. And then we'd also like to link in your beautiful gratitude practice. So let's go ahead and start at the very beginning, Lisa. Can you take us back to what you believe to be the contributing factors to what led to your substance use disorders?
Sure. Thank you. So I never really knew. The first substance I abused, I should say, as a kid was food. I write about it in the book. And I was always this gloomy, kind of anxious kid, very like glass, half empty. And I didn't know why, but I knew that I felt it's something that we hear a lot in recovery. I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin, which I think is common. But I didn't know what that was about, but I knew that I got comfort when I ate. Sugar in particular, but I didn't realize what I was doing was getting this dopamine kick, as an 8-year-old shoveling like yodels and ho-hos into my mouth. I just knew I felt better. And I also knew there was something wrong with it, with the way I did that, because it wasn't the way I knew it was something I had to hide from my mother, the way I did that, and that it wasn't the way other kids ate, sugar. And then I progressed and I soothed those feelings, and along with any other feeling that popped up with alcohol. I started drinking early when I always say that addiction to alcohol is not contagious, but it runs in packs. So you find your people. So I always found the kids in high school who like to drink, same in college, same in law school, all of that. And it just was my go-to. And I figured, this is how I blow off steam. This is how I feel better. What I now know, what really I didn't understand, was that the root of all of this were 2 things. One, I knew that my grandfather had died of alcohol-related disease, and I knew that maybe there was something genetic, but I believe I had a real genetic component to it. And 2, I didn't realize, sort of out of the gate as an 8-year-old eating chocolate, that What I was really medicating was what I eventually, for as awful as the detox was and scary, they got my diagnosis right, and I cannot thank them enough. So I was ultimately, the doctor, after the psychiatrist, Dr. Wolfson, after interviewing me multiple times in each day in the detox, said, listen, I think that you have major depressive disorder and an anxiety disorder. I think you've been self-medicating that with substances since you were a kid with, food, and then drugs and alcohol. And now that you have, and that's what's been, at the root of it. Now you've crossed a line beyond which now you can never drink safely again. And instead, and I couldn't imagine, I mean, it was a relief to get the diagnosis because it was like, oh, you have a name for it. This is a thing and this can be treated. But at the same time, I couldn't imagine how I was ever going to manage those feelings without drugs or alcohol. And he said, this is what we're going to do. You're going to, you'll be in therapy. You need to start a long-term program of recovery. You cannot drink. If you keep drinking, you will die. And he put me immediately on an antidepressant, on Lexapro, which happened. I was very fortunate that diagnosis worked for me. And he said, so hopefully this will help, kind of address the chemical imbalance in your brain so that you don't feel the same compulsion to self-medicate with alcohol. You'll be able to better manage your emotions. And it is not for everyone, obviously, medication. For me, it was, and it still is, and it will always be. I did the experiment of trying life without it. After about a year and change, I was like, oh, I feel so much better now. What part is sober and what part is the medication? And so I stepped all the way down and got off the medication, and I was fine until it was exactly 3 weeks. And then like the curtains just came down. And I was, I remember calling my therapist and saying, I have 4 days before I drink. I don't know why I said 4 days, but I was like, I can hang on like this for 4 days and then I'm going to drink. And she said, experiment's over. You're going to get back on medication. And now we know the answer. And so I'm not doing that experiment again. So at the root were these, I do think I have a genetic component. And I do think that there were these underlying untreated, undiagnosed mental health issues that made me more susceptible. So when the overwhelming kind of pressure and stress and exhaustion of life as a junior associate in the big New York firm came, it just was too much for me to handle.
You mentioned in the early part of your book about the mosquito of doom.
Yeah.
And
just buzzing.
I totally resonated with that. Can you tell us a little bit about the mosquito of doom?
Yeah. So the mosquito of doom is basically that buzz. It's like, how a mosquito buzzes in your ear and it is the most annoying thing. And I would always like smack my head when I would have a mosquito and I would never quite get it and it would keep buzzing and it wouldn't go away. It was that the mosquito of doom is like that voice that was in my head, or it was a voice, but it was also like almost like a physical clench, that everything was going to go wrong. Everything was bad. I was bad. This thing was going to go, it was the thing that made me, it would be in my kids would be, I remember being at the amusement park with a bunch of kids getting on a roller coaster that was doing a loop and they were so excited. And I was like, are you kidding me? You're going to fall straight down to the ground. Like, that's what, no matter what was going on, it was like, don't get excited. This is, no, something bad is going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. There's a beautiful passage in the book too, where it reminded me of the mosquito of doom. And I don't know if it's what you were talking about, but it's where it also seemed to me, it was though that it was the angel and the devil on one.
Oh, okay.
And you were saying, no, I have a headache. I want to go back to sleep. No, you have to get up. You're fat. You got to go to the gym.
Yeah.
And then it was this, can you tell us more about that?
Oh, yeah. I was thinking of it as in the other way, but yeah, you're right.
Oh, no. Tell me your way.
Yeah, no. So basically, yeah, it was that feeling of self-flagellation and that I would wake up, like you said, like I would wake up and be like, I am so hungover. I'm so tired. I've got to go back to sleep. I don't feel good. And that other thing going, nope, you got to go to the gym because you were out last night again and you ate pizza and you suck and you need to go punish yourself and
Yes.
punish yourself in a way. Right. Like that kind of concept.
Yeah.
And the punishing
Mhm.
myself won out most of the time.
So that must have also been linked with the depression.
Oh, it was linked with the depression, and it was linked with this feeling of guilt, I think, over the way I was behaving and that I needed to beat myself up. And it was also, there were so many components to that kind of thinking, because it was also the feeling of like, if I just get up and go to the gym and if I can go to the gym at 6 a.m, I can't possibly have a problem. I must be fine. So let me just prove how fine I am, get up and go to
Right.
the gym. Right. And it was always, I always had that voice, and we were talking about it a little bit before we started, but there was always that voice in me that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't smart enough. I didn't belong where I was. And, it really hit me when, as a first year associate, I got moved into the corporate finance practice at my law firm. And all of a sudden I was just like, and these people are going to realize I'm a fraud. I'm about to be fired. I don't belong here. These people all went to better schools than I did, and they love this stuff, and I don't even know what I'm talking about. And I realize now that I didn't have the words for it at the time I was writing the book, but it was imposter syndrome. And it was really feeling like I hadn't earned my seat somehow. I didn't belong where I was sitting, and it was all about to end. And anything like that, shut me. The only way I knew, the only, response I knew was to drink it away, drink till it, like the day that I was going back after I'd been told I was going to be a corporate finance lawyer on that Monday, all I could think was, I just want to drink. I just want to drink because I can't even process this news. I want to drink. So it was, it was the solution to everything. I just wanted to shut my mind up, from, whatever was going on.
There's so many beautiful examples in the book when you're talking about your work as being a lawyer and you're transitioning to the corporate finance from your humanitarian work. And there's so many beautiful passages, but one of my favorite passages is when I believe you talk about self-righteous behaviors in your victim mentality that you had around being transferred.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Sure. And it goes to what I learned in recovery of the idea of, playing the victim and being the phrase that always comes to me is pour me a drink, right? It's all, if you had my life, you'd drink too. And as if there was some fundamental unfairness that had been, visited upon me by not letting me have the exact job I wanted in the exact team I wanted exactly when I wanted it, and that was, it's like the way they handled it was, from the employer's point of view, like, hey, sorry, we don't have the work for you here, but we do there. Basically, if you stay here, you're going to get fired. We want to save your job. We think you're a good lawyer, so we're going to move you in here where you can actually do work. And I was like, how dare you? Like that. It was, if it wasn't my plan, it was something wrong. And when I ultimately failed, which I convinced myself I would, it was their fault, not mine, for not being able to adapt and figure it out. And meanwhile, what ended up happening was I adapted and figured it out. I practiced for 6 years in that group, and I never, I had all great performance reviews, and, I was doing fine. Then I got to the point where it was very clear to me after, in my 6th year, that to be more senior, you're really on the partner track at that stage at a big law firm. So it's a lot more responsibility, like late 6th, 7th, 8th years, you're really grind. And I knew what my drinking was like and what it meant for my lifestyle. And I was like, this is, first of all, I don't like what I'm doing. And second of all, it's completely incompatible with drinking. And one of them's got to go. I knew that. And then when it just so happened that an opportunity came up on the administrative side, that they were looking for associates in good standing who wanted to shift over and do business development with the partners, you know, it could have been like planting flowers outside the building. And I would have been like, yep, me, take me. I want out of that. You want me to do that instead, but I can still get paid here? Okay. You know, I just went with what, you know, it wasn't going to be the alcohol that was going at that point. That was for sure.
Can we transition? I was looking at the time. Can we transition into progression and negotiation? We've already started getting into that. And there's so many examples in the book that so beautifully illustrate what it was like for you. And early in the book, you talk about, and this is what's so shocking to me, how much you can say with so few words. It's
Thank you.
It's disarming, actually, and particularly when you're talking about the progression of your drinking from age 8 to 18, and you do it in about a page and a half. And so can you talk about what that looked like for you before we got into the world of being a professional lawyer, and what happened at that point?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, it all started, like I said, with the shutting down the feelings and with food at first. And then by the time, you know, and my parents threw these big parties, and everybody who drank, I'd see all this drinking, and everybody was happy and they were like relaxed, and I couldn't wait. Right. So my first drinks were sipping off drinks at their parties, but I knew, you know, I wasn't allowed to drink. And I was a rules person. So
Oh, yes.
yeah, you know, I wasn't supposed to do that. But as soon as I found the kids, you know, who were willing to steal beer out of their parents' basement refrigerators and go out in the woods and drink, and then it was like, I might have loved my chocolate, but man, when I drank, I was like, oh, that's it. That's the thing I was looking for, right? And then you know, and I write about it in the book, you know, I was a heavy kid, like boys weren't interested in me. But I hung out with the popular kids a lot. So they were interested in my friends. And it was like going to parties, drinking was a way to not care so much about being the one like sitting outside, you know, the room where everybody else had paired off. And I had one friend who did that with me. It was me and this other girl that were always alone. And, you know, that progression but then it became a way, not just when I went to college, you know, again, finding my water or finding my people. I found friends who we actually got to the point in college. I went to Northwestern. It's not known as a party school, but it was a party school for us. And it became a thing to blow off steam, right? And that's where a lot of the justification go, hey, we knock ourselves out all week. We got to go shoot the lights out on the weekends because that gives us, you know, that's when I first started venturing into what then in law school for sure became the work hard, play hard mentality, right? And that's what I think, you know, it all comes down to normalizing, right? Like I looked for the people between 8 and 18 who normalized getting blackout drunk, right? It wasn't a big deal for me to say, you know, who drove home last night? Because my friend would say, I don't remember, you know? Whereas if that hadn't been normalized in my world, people would be like, you don't remember last night? Like there's something wrong with that. You're a 15-year-old girl, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, and so things continue to get normalized. And then in law school and certainly in the legal profession, I always say it's soaked in alcohol, right? And it becomes the way, this is how we deal with stress, how we entertain people, how we do all these other things. And it went from being something that was just like, okay, let me just do this to shut my mind off for now, to being something that I needed. Like I needed to know when I was going to drink next, even in high school. Couldn't wait for Friday night because I knew I could like just, you know, sit in somebody's basement listening to Led Zeppelin and drink beer.
Right. Right. Uh, there's a place in the book where you talked about rationalizing your round the clock drinking, if I may.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Please.
Yes. Okay. I need my glasses. And like, there's like 100 of these in the book. Okay. Okay. All right.
That's so sweet.
Okay. In addition to all the physical symptoms, the come down from coke and wine meant crushing black-hearted depression. Tears streamed from my eyes, and the chorus of self-hatred raised its voice. It told me that life had no meaning. I was a fraud. I'd never have real love. Nothing was ever going to get better. The mindfuck went on for hours as I thrashed my way through broken sleep. Somehow, I managed to get to work the following days, swallowing potentially toxic levels of Advil and industrial-sized cups of coffee. I considered drinking booze to kill the pain, but I stopped myself. Morning drinking was only for serious alcoholics, not high-functioning partiers like me.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. It was, yeah. I mean, that was, and that goes back to what you were talking about, the mosquito of doom, right?
Yeah.
Saying, well, you better get up and go to the gym. If you think you're a normal person and you're this hungover, but that's okay because you're a normal person, you better get to the gym, right? And prove it. And, you know, every time I think of all those mornings that I used to wake up in the morning, and this was for years, I hate to say it, my 24/7 was the last 18 months of my drinking, but the waking up in the morning and going, oh, that's again, not again. And and so much like I'd be fine if I just didn't wake up, you know, and all of that to that was the norm, to being like, I don't, you know, just get up, one foot on the ground, just go, just come on, you can be normal, you can act normal. You know, everybody else thinks you're normal, just show up.
Yeah. You know, there's another beautiful reference that happens several times throughout the book where you have conversations with your mirror as you left the house.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And the last entry you had of the conversation you had with the mirror, it was chilling to me.
Was it where
it was
I
where,
said,
because go ahead.
I know, like at the end too, like the most common thing, I would just be like, you are pathetic, you are disgusting, I hate you. I hate you. I would say to myself out loud in that mirror. And that was, you know, I would leave for work. I would have had to calibrate myself, you know, with some wine and some Coke. And then I'd get my balance. I'd have my makeup on. It was so like just painting a face on and putting a costume on and going and just look. I would be all ready and I would be checking in that mirror by my door that I kept by the door when I was leaving my apartment. I would check my teeth for lipstick. I would check my nose for like blow or blood. And then I would look at myself and say, I hate you. And then I would leave for work. Like, ding, you know, with
Unbelievable.
It was just like, I don't know. And, you know, the thing is like, if I had just, and this is part of why it was so important to me to sort of own my story and to, you know, let other people know that they're not alone, because what I couldn't imagine was, what would I be if I wasn't this? What would it be like? You know? And the answer is better. It will be better, right? It will not always be easy. It will not always be simple, but it will be better. But that was so unfathomable to me.
Yeah.
And I knew how bad I was. I knew how sick I was physically. But, and the other piece of it that is very much for people, you know, I see it with lawyers a lot, but it's that, you know what, this is terrible. And it's what I said to myself the morning that I pulled the bottle out, that I had a drink in the morning to go to work the first time. I remember just being like, all right, this is terrible, not good. This is the line we didn't want to cross, but I'm going to get this under control. I'm not going to become a morning drinker. You know, and it was beyond me. It was too big for me. I couldn't, you know, I can get this under control. No, you can't. You've been telling yourself this for 10 years.
It's the greatest lie. It's the greatest lie we tell, is that we can get it under control.
It's a total,
yeah.
And that we expect that of ourselves. Like, I don't need help, you know, whatever's wrong with me, I'm going to fix it. And God forbid I let people know that it's out there, because then they'll try to fix me. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what it's going to look like for me after that.
We're going to get to that conversation with Lou, and I can't
Yeah.
wait. I can't wait. Another thing that just made so much sense to me is when you talked about how you just didn't have, you had a faulty stop mechanism.
Oh yeah. I
Can you
know. Yeah.
can you talk about
Other
that?
people seem to, normal people, right?
Normal.
Seem to have, a stop button. It like at some point their brain tells them, I've had enough alcohol. I'm done. That was great. I'm buzzed. I'm done. Or, I don't really want another one. I'm gonna stop here. Not possible. Not possible. And that was one of the big things that was one of the big signs to me that I knew when I knew it was getting out of hand. And this was years before I got sober, when I started really seeing that there would be these nights where I swore I was only going to have two. I swore I was whatever. And then I would wake up, like I write about it in the book when I like screwed my friends over and didn't show up
Yes.
for dinner because I had said I was just going to meet my friend Peter for one drink. And I woke up the next morning like, what happened? And everybody's mad at me, and they should be mad at me, yeah. So what, maybe at one point it was just faulty, but then I had like absolutely no stop. There was no stop, like the plug got pulled and it was 24/7 at the end.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I think that's part of I don't know, somehow part of my DNA that I just didn't have that.
We have that same DNA gene, that one. So
Yeah.
I hear you.
One is,
Yeah.
one is too many and a million's not enough.
Yes, exactly. In the interest of time, we need to move forward. So the next part is hiding the severity of your issue from those that loved you. Like it's from the way that you depict, at least the way I understood that you wrote the book. It sounded like you had a really incredible group of friends who loved you and supported you. And the same thing with your family, your dad, your mom, and your late father, your mom and your brother. That people were really rooting for you, and they just didn't know. And so you mentioned how good you got, as many of us do, with covering, hiding, lying. And so what was that? Well, can you tell us a bit more about that? Because you had so many things going on too. You had a huge risk to your situation as well, because you had to hide it from your family, you had to hide it from your work, and the added component that your employer is a law firm. There's just so much going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just sort of, I never had to think too hard about the actual hiding, because it just, I thinking back later, I realized that it just flowed from, I sort of see it as, there are two spirals we go down when we go down into substance use disorders. And one is hold on, I gotta sneeze. Excuse me.
That's you.
One is the physical, right? The not being able to stop goes, or I'm having too many, goes into the, I need to drink before I go out. I need to drink at lunch. That's that spiral going down. But there's a parallel spiral happening there that is, oh, I don't think people might not think this is normal. Oh, I'm so ashamed. I'm afraid to tell anyone. I don't want them to find out how much I'm drinking. There's like a shame. And for me, it was a complete depletion of my self-esteem all the way down, which wasn't high to begin with. But, it's like this fear and the shame and everything goes parallel to, it's like there's these two separate pieces going on. And so I kind of automatically at each stage figured out what was okay and what was not okay for me to expose, right? And how to hide. I had the built-in excuse because everybody was used to me saying, hey, I'm not going to make it, I got to work, right? That was normal because I worked so many hours. But as it got, further into it where it needed to be around the clock, I had to figure out things like, I would go, I'm in New Jersey at my brother Lou's right now. I've been in New York this week, for work, and I would have to if I was coming to New Jersey to visit my parents, I would take a bus out on a Saturday morning. So I had to calibrate, like I would be like, okay, I have to drink before I go to Port Authority bus station, but then I would also have to have a drink at Port Authority bus station at like 8 in the morning with the other people who needed a drink at 8 in the morning. And
Mhm.
there, that was
Mhm.
really not a great place. And then I would have to figure out how to hide all of that and pretend like from minute one, there was no normal minute that I spent with anybody. There was no minute in those, particularly in those 18 months of hiding, where I wasn't playing a role, where I wasn't faking it, where I was honest with anybody. And it's funny because well, it's not fun, but in
Mhm.
recovery, they would say, like, how do you know that an addict is lying? And the answer is their mouth is moving. Because whatever it was, even if I was telling you something very true, the reality of me was a lie at that
Mhm.
moment, right? Like you
Mhm.
think you know who's sitting across from you, but you don't. And it was all I took to keep it inside. And I didn't feel like I had any other option, any other way to do it. And I felt horrible because I loved everybody and I
Mhm.
didn't want to be lying to them. I didn't want to be, but at the same time, I was so terrified of getting help or what it would mean to get help, or what if my law firm found out and blah, blah, blah. I can't do that. I can't do that. So I didn't see an alternative
Yeah.
to hiding. So when, you mentioned like when my brother asked me, like, why didn't we would have wanted to help you? Like, why?
Mhm.
I wish you could have told us. And it was like, I wasn't ready.
Mhm.
I couldn't tell you that. It was like physically and somehow
Mhm.
emotionally impossible. It was, go ahead.
No, and I'm just so glad that you brought this up. This is absolutely something that I think is so important, and we have to talk about this because I think the world needs to hear you say this. In that section of the book where
Mhm.
you're at Blue's house, or no, you're at your parents'
Oh,
house.
we were at
You're
my
at your
parents.
parents'
Yeah.
house in the backyard. You went out for a smoke, and Lou joined you.
Mhm.
And Lou asked you, or you asked how are the parents doing with this? He says, oh, they're
Oh,
fine,
yeah.
but how are you?
Yeah.
And then he asked you, or he said to you, we would have done anything to help you. Why didn't you
Yes.
reach out? And your response to him was, I didn't want to stop.
Right.
And then the few lines that went between the two of you. So you said that to him and you had to let that sink in because he had to let that sink in.
Yeah.
And then you responded with, if you knew what I was putting into my body, you would try to stop me. And I
You would
couldn't
have
let you try to
carted
stop
me
me.
off to a hospital.
Right. And why I think it is so important, if there's 5 lines out of your book that need to be available for public consumption all the time, it's this, because so many people who are dealing with loved ones who are dealing with this have no idea why we don't stop.
Right.
They don't get
Right.
it. They don't get it because they don't have the
Yeah.
experience. But for you to say, I didn't want to stop,
Yeah.
it really starts to put things into perspective. And so I'm so grateful that
Oh, I'm so glad.
you shared with us that conversation with Lou, because people need to hear that.
Yeah, and I think it was not even, and it's funny because it was not about like I didn't want to stop means I want to keep living the way I'm living. It meant nothing like that,
Right.
right? It meant I don't want to deal with whatever I'm going to have to clean up with this,
Right.
and I don't know what the other side looks like. Am I
Mhm.
gonna, are all my friends gonna like not hang out with me anymore because I don't drink? Are you
Mhm.
guys going to hate me because now I've lied to you for so long and I've been
Yeah.
so dishonest, now like Lou didn't know there's a scene where I'm don't make it to the hospital when my niece was born.
Right.
And when he was reading, because I had everybody reading drafts,
Oh.
and
Oh.
yeah, and he was like, and I said, I said, I don't know if you remember, but I wasn't, there the day Caroline was born. And, because this is like, I mean, 10 years later when we're doing this,
Yeah.
right? And he was like, I don't remember, but whatever. Yeah, I guess maybe. And I was like, well, I write about that day in the book. And so I'm just giving you a heads up on it. And he was just like so upset by that,
Oh.
like
I
not upset at me, but upset, sad that
yes.
he was like having the best day of his life.
And
So
you said later, after you had recounted that, you said you wonder if the sting of that moment would ever
yeah,
dissolve,
yeah.
and has it?
You know what? I gotta say, like, it has.
Mm,
It has. It is one of those, look back but don't stare, because that's what I'm
mm,
capable of, but it has, because it has been since I got sober with Caroline and with Ben, who I was my nephew, who's 16, uh, who I did make it to the hospital when he was born because I was sober. But it has been a living amends. Like one of the greatest gifts in my sobriety is that I get to have a relationship with these kids, these amazing kids, who I adore and who love me and get excited when we're all going to hang out, like that has, and Caroline, my niece now, she's finishing her sophomore year in college. She's, and she knows that story now. And that's okay, because she didn't know that aunt. Like, I joke with Ben, I'm like, you're the only one who never saw me drunk. Um, and so it is like these things that are stains and that can feel like awful stains. It's amazing what living a sober life can, I mean, I feel like I have made it up to them in a living amends. And by me doing this living amends, they have given me more than I could ever make up,
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I could talk to you forever. Okay, so I think we will leave it to our readers to learn about Gracie Square. But I will say that, and I have no idea if this is what you intended,
Yeah.
but I have never laughed so hard as I did when you described the Asian floor. Like, I can't say it without laughing. Like, was it really, like, was that your intention? Because I swear to God, I had to stop reading because I couldn't see. I couldn't.
It was, yeah. It's funny because a lot of people accuse me of having made that up, and I
Okay,
say,
just tell us about the Asian floor. Please tell us about the Asian
right. I go, so, well, so when I realized what a mistake I had made, signing myself in on a psych hold at Gracie Square, which sounded nice, I really lost it. I lost my mind. I didn't know. I was trying to get out of there. I was trying to call the police. I wouldn't let them, I tried to not let them take blood, and I wouldn't take any pills, like Librium, to calm down. And so as a compromise, they said, they would put me on the Asian floor, which is Asian patients, with various mental health disorders and their families, and they prefer to be in an environment with, familiar food, familiar language, everything, and that I could stay there. And it ended up being like, it was one of those things where I was like, you can't make this up. Meanwhile, you can Google Gracie Square hospital, and they have a tab, Asian patients. Like, the Asian floor is real. And it was calmer. It was calmer. It was a lot. There's a lot going on there. And that was, I mean, to me, it was like, that was why, the reason that that passage is so vivid. And I started writing as soon as I got out of the hospital, because I was like, that experience I need to write down. I feel like that's how I started writing it all, was like, I got to write down what happened in there.
Oh my God.
I don't want to forget. And it was kind of insane, but kind of hilarious at the same time.
Yes.
And I was like, I need this. I need to put this down. And also, my niece had just been born, and I was like, what if maybe she needs to read this at some point, But yeah, so I started writing that. I wrote that. That was the first scene I wrote.
Wow.
So that was why it was like very clear in my mind. I had just gotten out.
Read the scene if everybody hasn't. It's quite something. Okay. The moment that you say that will forever be unknown to you. So your aha moment. Can you share with us what that was?
Yeah. So, it was the end of 18 months of 24/7. And, I was obviously it was just like an incredibly dark place. And it was a Monday morning when I walked out of my Apartment. I went to the elevator and I was going to work and I just became like completely overcome. Like I didn't know what was happening. Like, and I thought in that moment, I thought I was either having a heart attack or that I had finally overdosed and that this was it.
Mhm.
And for some reason in that moment, I just kind of, it was almost like an outer body, like I went zoomed out and looked at what was happening in the hallway and went, wait, that's not how this should end. Right. And so what I was having was a panic attack, but I didn't realize it. And so something snapped and was like, wait, I don't want to die in this hallway. Literally, I remember being like, I don't want to die in this hallway. And I had that image that I wrote about. It really came to me in that moment, like my parents coming and standing over me and my neighbor being like, she seemed like such a nice girl, and I just said, I want to live. It was a snap of like, I want to live. And I knew if I want to live, the only way I could live was to get to a hospital ASAP. And so I went right back into my apartment. And that was when I first poured another glass of wine and then called my doctor. But you know what it was, and it goes back to sort of that idea of like, how do you, try and get somebody to get help who doesn't want help? The person has to take a decision, and in that moment, I remember saying, it's over, I'm done, it's over. And there was a relief that came with it, but there was also like a terror. And then I called my friend Mark, who lived in the building, who had just called me out like 2 weeks before, and I had sent him packing. And, I knew he'd be there for me. So for anybody, whatever it was, some people in recovery call it a God shot, whatever, I decided I wanted to live in that moment. And that was that. But for anybody who has a friend or a family member or, that they're trying to help who just won't get help, I mean, hopefully this is giving you some insight in that it's not, a lot of it is I don't know what's on the other, I'm afraid, the stakes, but keep being there, because I knew I in that instant that for all my telling Mark, to get out and never come back, I knew he would have my back. I knew he was there to support me. And the person has to take a decision for themselves, I think. And, maybe that decision comes because of someone else or because of some situation, but it has to be that they want it. And in that moment, something snapped and I said, I don't know what it is. I still don't know the answer, what it's going to be on the other side, but I want it. Let's go. If I could survive whatever heart attack I thought I was having.
Right. Last question. So we've mentioned quite a bit about normal and how normal has shifted throughout your journey, and you spoke many times in this interview, but tons of times in the book about, well, normal people should be able to, or do shut off after 2. Normal people stop drinking later on in life. And you talk about the behaviors of normal people with such disdain, really, and then you beautifully describe so many times in the later part of the book how these normal activities bring you such joy. Like the first passage I remember reading about you associating positively with normal was getting up early to make a coffee with your coffee machine you no longer neglected in your pajamas, watching a sunrise from your New York apartment.
Unbelievable. That was, those things still blow me away. And I will never not feel grateful. For whatever reason, the first thing that I started doing automatically when I would wake up in the morning is just be like, thank you. And I still do that every morning. Like when it hits me that, here I am, it's another day, I'm not drinking, thank you. I didn't know who I was talking to, what I was talking to, but I needed to do that. And yes, just very simple things that I used to envy so much in other people. Like just going to the beach on the weekends in a share house with my friends and, being in a pair of boxer shorts and a tank top. And that's how I passed out, if I, whatever, I didn't have pajamas. And I don't know why, but I never thought like I was the kind of person who got to sort of, okay, now I'm going to change and
Yeah.
put on these normal pajamas and relax. Like, no, I was just go until you pass out.
Mhm.
And, pajamas seemed like a very normal thing that other people had. And now I have many pajamas. But just the little things, to have a cup of coffee in the morning. And it took months before my hand stopped shaking. But, to be able to hold a cup of coffee without shaking hands,
Mhm.
it's unbelievable.
Mhm.
And I realized how much, in not letting myself think a normal life was possible for me, and sort of maybe if I acted more as if, maybe if I had tried to be a person who wore pajamas earlier, or a person who drank coffee in the morning and made coffee and had time, that could have acclimated me somehow. But there were just, my mind had been in the place where I would be out on my way to work. And I think I read about this in the book too, and seeing somebody walking their dog in the
Mhm.
morning, and thinking, first of all, that person, why aren't you drinking? If you could be drinking, why aren't you drinking? And then looking at the dog and being like, I wish I was that dog, because then I wouldn't have to be this addict trying to get into work,
Mhm.
and to wake up and just be like, hey, I think I'll have a cup of coffee. It's like, it lifts so much, of the toxicity that ran through my head 24/7.
Mhm.
It was an opportunity to not live in that and to live in little things.
And this ties in beautifully with what you talk about or have talked about, pardon me, on the Recovery Rocks podcast about
Mhm.
your gratitude baseline.
Yeah.
And what do you mean by that?
There is, I think a lot of people, practice. I mean, gratitude has to be practiced.
Mhm.
I think you have to be remembering it. But like, some people walk around not particularly grateful for anything, or aware of how much there is to be grateful for. And I think the way we talked about it on the podcast was in the sense of like, I have baseline, like gratitude guides my day from a certain baseline. Like I go into everything like grateful to have the opportunity, right? No matter what it is. If it's, if I get to speak to a group like this, it's like up here, because this is, beyond my wildest dreams. Like when they say in recovery, like you can have a life beyond your wildest dreams. Doing this tonight, what we were doing, I literally couldn't have dreamt when
Yes.
I was, back then.
Mhm.
And, there is to me, and I think to Tawny, also my podcast partner, we remain very a high baseline of gratitude. We remain very aware of it, and we live in gratitude. We try to live in gratitude. I think that's what we were talking about. It
Mhm.
is a practice, and I can practice meditation. I can practice yoga. I'm not particularly good about those, but I do practice gratitude, and that alone helps me from getting down on myself, down on my life, down on whatever it is. I can be sad and I can still be grateful,
Mhm.
right? Like I lost my mom in December,
Oh,
and
bless.
yeah, and
Sorry.
so I at that time I was heartbroken, terribly sad. I still am,
Mhm.
but also so grateful that I got to, have her in my life and show up for her, even sober, imagine, and that balances it out. It's the opposite in a way, what we were talking about earlier, of me being a victim,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like everything was like, well, of course I'm an idiot, of course I'm a mean person, of course I'm, drinking. Look how I've been victimized. It's flipping it. It's the flip side of it. The flip side of that victimization in active addiction is, I think, this kind of baseline gratitude. And it's the other side. It's the side I didn't see when I was a little unmedicated kid.
Right. um, would you do us the honor
Oh,
and close our formal interview here with a reading of I think you know which piece of the book.
yes, I will. I have to put my glasses on. So I'm going to read the epilogue from my book at the end. It's now been 19 years, but when I wrote it, it's been 12 years since I got sober. I've apologized to people I hurt when I was drinking and using drugs. They haven't all forgiven me. I hold a job I would have lost in a week if I were drinking. Twice during presentations, I've suffered anxiety attacks so vicious that I've had to halt the meeting and lower my head into deep breaths as partners handed me glasses of water. I married a wonderful man in the Santa Fe home that we bought together. I wore a pale blue because white would have felt ridiculous. I held my father's hand and gave him morphine as he lay dying. Then I pulled myself together and delivered a eulogy that I hope was worthy of him. I've watched friends I met in recovery jam on stage with rock gods and act in the hottest HBO television shows. I've built friendships with people who came to a 12-step meeting one day and relapsed the next. I buried a best friend. I still can't accept his death. I regularly call sober friends from 12-step programs who help me stay clean. In turn, I help incredible people to stand up straight, salvage their careers, save their marriages, and anchor their families. I now have a niece and nephew, and I made it to the hospital the day Ben was born. I'm the aunt who shows up for sleepovers. On many mornings, I haven't wanted to get out of bed. On most mornings, I've gotten out of bed. And at this time, on more than 4,000 mornings, I have awakened and made a decision. Just for today, I will not drink.
Lisa, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.